Alright, this video is going to be about the wealth gap and why I think it's just a natural consequence of a democracy, but mostly capitalism. Alright, so I say democracy because democracy allows people to be able to choose, and in capitalism, you allow people to make their choices and how they're going to make their wealth. Alright, and the wealth gap specifically, that's where the whole 99% versus the 1% comes into play, where you hear statistics like the top 1% of people in the United States own 40% of the wealth in terms of assets, while the bottom, let's say 80% only own less than 10%. So just something usually seems off about that, and that's why the whole wealth gap issue just comes into play. But I don't personally feel that the wealth gap is something that we can do away with. I think it's something that we can absolutely manage, but it's just a natural consequence of people taking risks and other people not taking risks. And I'm going to give an example. So let's say we have person A decides that he likes to play things safe. He just wants to go to school, graduate, get a job, and make about $50,000, and at the peak of his career make about $150,000. And person B doesn't really go to school, but takes huge risks and decides he's going to set out on his own, do something he's passionate about, and he becomes successful. So person A is going to be making, at best, at some point, we hope, $150,000 a year after going to school for 4 years and then working for another 4 years, probably leaving that first job and working for another 4 years, another job, and then finally building a career, making $150,000. But person B starts making millions of dollars. Now, this doesn't always happen. A lot of people fail, which is, when you're in a capitalist society, you're basically saying that you're willing to compete. And if you compete and you're very good, you can win. If you compete and you're bad, you can lose. But if you win and you're smart about winning and you're more productive, person A is going to keep making that $150,000 every single year. Person B is going to continue to take risks. He's not just going to rest on his laurels and say, I made $1 million. He's going to make $1 million this year, try and make $50 million in 2 years, and then $100 million 2 years after that. And he's going to keep being productive. So it's a mentality. So my emphasis here is that the wealth gap is a very natural consequence of democracy and capitalism. My issue and why, the whole bonds and kindness, art for the 99%, the brand I'm putting together, which is really just an extension of things I'm passionate about and I can work on in my spare time. But, the whole reason behind it is not to say that the wealth gap should not exist. That's just natural. What I'm basically against is how unfair the wealth gap is when society is slanted to favor that top 1%. I believe if a society invests in its infrastructure, education, roads, good police, availability of water, availability of safety, or whatever it is, just a very strong infrastructure, and people are able to make up their minds if they want to be person A or they want to be person B. If a society does its very best to produce a very safe haven and a very productive haven for young minds so they can mold themselves and make the right choices, then fine. Whatever the wealth gap is, the wealth gap is. Everyone is happy. But if the wealth gap exists because of corporatism, where governments are favoring companies, and there's subsidies where there shouldn't be subsidies, and subsidies that should have ended a long time ago, they continue, and politics get in the way of progress, that's where I have the problem, and that's where I believe we are currently at right now. But when it comes to the wealth gap, there's a conversation that I feel like people aren't having, where I see people commentate every now and then where they just go, everyone should have, equal everything. I think we should all be equal. Basically arguing for communism. I'm not saying, Karl Marx didn't know what he was talking about, but I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism, and I think the wealth gap is natural, but it has to be healthy while being natural.